Hello and welcome back to Christie's Cozy Corner, and we are going to be doing a tier ranking video. This is going to be tier ranking all of the 39 books that I read in the first half of the year. We're just gonna go ahead and take a look at the tiers that I'm going to use. Okay, so I have my tier maker pulled up here, and just at a quick glance, for anyone who is cultured enough, you will probably recognize these as various SpongeBob memes. So as I'll go through these tiers, I'll also just put like an image or a quick video of the meme itself so you know what I am referencing. So at the very top, we have He Was Number One.
It was his hat, Mr. Krabs. He was number one.
And this one is pretty self-explanatory. This is the best of the best, the one that's going to be at the very top. There can only be one, and we're just gonna get this right out of the way. It goes to Guns of the Dawn. And I think that comes as no surprise to anyone because I've been gushing about this book nonstop since I've read it. I even have a 15-minute gush review just about this book. I'll go ahead and link that if anyone is curious. But yeah, this one was pretty obvious. The next tier is chocolate!
Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!
And this is the one that has all the books that I am just super passionate about. I love so much, and I just want to scream at the top of my lungs for everyone and anyone to read it. The next tier is a little bit of a step below that, and that is I Love You.
I love you.
And these are the books that I also really love, but just maybe not to quite the degree as something that I would put into chocolate. The tier after that is You're Good, You're Good, You're Good.
You're good. You're good. You're good.
And this is the tier for books that I thought, were pretty solid. They weren't my absolute favorite things in the world, and I still really liked them. And for this, I really just needed a tier that signified something in between some of the other ones. The next tier is I'm Ugly and I'm Proud.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Good! Say it louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Louder.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
And this is the tier that's for books that, I know objectively that they're not really that great. There's definitely a lot of issues with them, and I understand where all the criticisms come from, but I still really enjoyed these books. And not to say that I'll like die on the hill defending them, but I will stand by my love for them. So for these, I'm Ugly and I'm Proud. The tier below that is Food, Drink, Atmosphere.
But where's the pizzazz?
Huh?
Look at this place. I mean, what is the theme here? Underwater? It's boring. Food, water, atmosphere.
And these are the books that are just missing substance. They're just lacking in something that I really wanted from them. They didn't meet my expectations. Just overall kind of disappointing. Okay, and before we get into these last two tiers, let me just emphasize that, these are all for jokes. These tiers are just for fun. It's all just my opinion. It's all in good fun. Please don't take offense when I talk about the next tier, which is Bold and Brash, more like belongs in the trash.
How about this one? I call it Bold and Brash.
More like belongs in the trash. Ah!
And obviously, these are books that I personally did not like and think belong in the garbage. Okay, just kidding, okay? They don't actually belong in the garbage. In my opinion, they do. No, I'm kidding. Okay, and the last tier is My Eyes!
My eyes!
And these are reserved for just the worst books I have ever read, like the sheer audacity for them to even exist and subject my eyes and brain to their horrificness. Like, just how dare they? All right, so let's start off this tier ranking now with the first book, Dracula by Bram Stoker. Now, this book, I really didn't enjoy all that much. I found that it was really dull, and like, I can recognize the importance of this text because it is such a pinnacle horror novel, and so many subsequent horror novels have drawn inspiration from this. But the way it was told was just in like the most boring way possible. It was all done in these long letters exchanged by these different people that were just kind of like talking about Dracula. And also they were just so clueless all the time. I cannot tell you how many times I nearly fell asleep reading this book. So I'm gonna put this into food drink atmosphere. It was not good. All right, and the next book is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. And I've only read the first 2 books of the Stormlight Archives so far, but of the 2 that I have read, Words of Radiance is definitely my favorite. And not just because it had just some of the funnest and best Adolin scenes, Adolin. But just overall, this book did everything that The Way of Kings did, but even more. We got so many fun interactions between the characters. If I had to say, like, what makes the Stormlight Archive so great, it's because of the things that happened in this book. So I'm gonna put it into chocolate. It is pure, delicious chocolate. This next book is Dark Currents by Lindsay Buroker. This is the second book of the Emperor's Edge series, which is one of my favorite series. It's a self-published steampunk fantasy, but I will admit that this second book is probably the weakest one of the whole series. So this series is told in 2 different perspectives. We always have the main character Amaranth's perspective, but we also have a secondary character's perspective, another member of her crew. And each book follows a different secondary perspective. The secondary perspective in this book is just not one that was really compelling to me. I found it to be quite weak. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put this book into food drink atmosphere. Oh, and before I go any further, I also should mention that these tiers don't necessarily correlate with any star ratings as well. Like, there could be something that I rated pretty high, but because of expectations or because of whatever reason, it might end up getting like one of the lower rankings. So just, we'll keep that in mind. The next book is The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in Mistborn Era 2. And I really enjoyed Era 2. Well, actually, I'm still reading it, and spoiler alert, I just finished Shadows of Self, and it was so good. I gave it 5 stars. Like, I really don't understand when people say that Era 2 is not good or they're gonna skip it entirely. Like, no, it baffles me. Like, how can you think this is not good? Like, I honestly think it's some of Sanderson's best plotting. Like, it is actually really great. And maybe this is a hot take, but I think if Mistborn Era 1 never even existed and we just went straight into Mistborn in Era 2, I think I would still like it just as much. And then like maybe later if he did like a prequel with Era 1, it would just make it even better. But I think Era 2 really does stand on its own, and it's really solid, and I love it. And you know what? I'm actually gonna put this in I'm Ugly and I'm Proud, because everyone just craps on Era 2 all the time. But you know what? I will defend it. I think it's really good. It's a really solid series, very enjoyable read, has a lot of like classic Sanderson oh shit moments, and obviously the Sanderlanche. So you know what? I'm ugly and I'm proud about this book. All right, the next is The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock, which is probably one of the worst books that I have ever read. I hate this book with every fiber of my being. Every moment of reading it was absolute suffering, and for that it is obviously going into my eyes, because oh my god, my eyes, or rather my ears, since I listened to the audiobook. But okay, so there's this one character named Carl, and he likes to smoke these cigars, but he calls them dog dicks for some reason, and there'll be so many times where it mentioned Carl took another one of his dog dicks, and I'm like, if I had to hear about that a single more time, I was gonna lose it. I was gonna fucking lose it. Okay, and next, somehow we have all 5 of the Cassandra Clare books all together in a row, which is weird because when I put this tier ranking together, I didn't have these books like all in a row or together or upload them together or anything. So like, that's weird. How does Tiermaker know to put the series together? Wild. We're actually going to start off with Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, the first book in the Infernal Devices trilogy. And you know what? For both Clockwork Angel and Clockwork Prince, I'm putting them into food, drink, atmosphere. Unfortunately, these did not live up to the expectations that I had, which were mostly because of the hype that were surrounding the love triangle specifically. Everyone says that this is like one of the best love triangles of all time to be written, and I just don't agree. Like, I don't see anything about this love triangle that is very compelling, especially Will and Tessa. I do not understand the bond and feelings between these two characters at all. I feel like the books didn't do a very good job of showing us why these two feel for each other the way that they do. Like, even Tessa and Jem too. I don't really see what Jem sees in Tessa. I can definitely understand Tessa's perspective because Jem is an absolute gem. But yeah, I think it's just Tessa as a character in general. I find her to be quite boring and not very compelling at all. And also another reason why I haven't really liked this series is because of Will. Oh my god, I do not understand all the love for Will. I find him to be so obnoxious and annoying. Like, no matter the reasons for him acting the way that he does, I still don't really like him. And I haven't finished the last book in this series, so maybe after I read that, I might change my mind, like about the love triangle specifically. But for now, these 2 books are in food, drink, atmosphere. And unpopular opinion maybe, but I actually like the Mortal Instruments series better than the Infernal Devices. And I'm gonna put all 3 of the Mortal Instruments series into I'm Ugly and I'm Proud. Because yes, I know this series gets a lot of flack and I totally understand why. Like, the plot is pretty generic, is not anything that unique. It's actually quite derivative of Harry Potter, and the characters are also not all that special. But I just really like Jace as a character. And okay, also I know like the twist that happens at the end of the first book, which is technically a spoiler, but everyone pretty much already knows, was definitely a choice that was consciously made. And it was a weird one. But, you know, overall, I still enjoyed my time reading all 3 of these books. I even gave the last one of this first arc 5 stars, which biggest surprise to myself. But yeah, you know, I like these books and not ashamed to admit it. I'm ugly and I'm proud. The next book we have here is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I really enjoyed my time reading. This book was super fascinating and I love just exploring all of the different thoughts and concepts that it did. So I'm putting this in I Love You because I really loved this book. Next we have Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, and oh boy, this one is the first one that I'm really conflicted on where to put it, because on one hand I can recognize like the quality of the writing and the story, and like the world building was fascinating. Like, I really enjoyed reading about the Tower of Babel and all the different floors that it had, but I feel like Senlin as a character I didn't really like, and the characters in general were probably the weakest parts, and it just didn't really live up to my expectations. I wanted to love it a lot more than I actually did. So I don't know, it's a choice between You're Good and Food, Drink, Atmosphere. You know what? I haven't had anything in You're Good yet, so I think I will put this in You're Good because, I still enjoyed my time reading this book and I am going to continue reading it. So, yeah, it was good. It was good. Next we have Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, the second book in the Devabad trilogy, and I love this book a lot for similar reasons to Words of Radiance, actually. Because of all these characters and the interactions between all of them, I just had so much fun. It was such a blast reading this book, so I'm putting this into chocolate. Okay, next we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave this book 5 stars when I read it. It was definitely a compelling read, and it made me ugly cry. But I find myself not really thinking about this book all that much after reading it. Like, sometimes I forget that I even read it at all until I see this kind of list about all the books that I read so far this year. So it was good, but the story just doesn't really stick with me. So it's going into just You're Good. Next we have Iron Gold by Pierce Brown, the 4th book of the Red Rising saga. And this is actually my second favorite book of the series so far. My first one being Morningstar. And if Morningstar was on this list, then I definitely would put Morningstar into chocolate because that book was just amazing. Iron Gold, I think, is a pretty close second, so I'm going to put this book into I Love You. And what's even better about this book is that finally we get some other perspectives other than just Darrow. Being in Darrow's head 24/7 can get really grating. And I know Morningstar is all still in his head, but Morningstar was just something special, For Iron Gold, we finally have 3 other perspectives, so 4 in total. It was just so nice to get out of Darrow's head for a while. This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Matar and Max Gladstone. It's pure, delicious chocolate. This book I just love so much, and every time I read it is just such a wonderful experience. To read these letters that are being exchanged by these 2 characters, the beautiful language and the love that is conveyed in these letters is just absolutely beautiful. And I would urge anyone and everyone just to try it out to see how you would like it. Because while the writing is very metaphorical and purpley, I just think you really need to just try it out for yourself to see how you would like it. Next we have The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed, and I really liked this book the first half when I read it, and I was so sure that it was actually going to be a new favorite. It was going to be a 5 stars, but the second half of this book was just absolute bananas. Like, the plot was all over the place. There were scenes included that I don't understand why they were there. Like, they really didn't serve anything in the end. The characters got really annoying, and it was in the second half of this book where the first person present tense perspective really just got to me, which I will say again is one of my least favorite perspectives. So anytime a book is told in this perspective, it just takes me out of the story. And that's another reason why I have some issues with Red Rising sometimes. Yeah, The Wolf and the Woodsman, I really wanted that second half to be just as good as the first half. And if it was, then it definitely would have been in I Love You. But because it just didn't live up to what it could have been, the potential, it's going into food drink atmosphere. I'm sorry. Next we have The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, and this series is so severely underhyped. Not many people have read this, as I definitely want them to, and I love it so much for the characters and the magic and the world, and because of that, I'm putting it into chocolate because I just want to scream at everyone and anyone to please read this series. I just love it. And on a similar note, Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Again, I love the characters, the writing, the world building, and the magic. Everything about this book just works completely perfectly for me. And I recognize that it's not going to land well for everyone, but just like This Is How You Lose the Time War, I feel like it's kind of hard to gauge like which side of the fence someone is going to fall on when it comes to Gideon the Ninth. And I just love it so much. So I'm putting it personally into chocolate. The next book we have is Under the Lesser Moon by Shelley Campbell, which is a self-published fantasy that I read earlier this year. And again, this is just another one that I don't find myself thinking about at all after having read it. Like, it wasn't bad by any means, but I just don't find the story really sticking with me. And it's not like I really had any expectations for it going in because I really didn't know what it was about when I picked it up. I just kind of picked it up on a whim. But ultimately, I think it just didn't deliver the potential that it could have, so I'm putting this into food drink atmosphere. Next is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, and I'm putting this one into I Love You. And I'm putting the next book in the series, the Monk and Robot series, A Prayer for the Crown Shy, into chocolate. I loved both these books a lot, and I think they just really meant something meaningful to me personally. I just love the second book in this series even more. Just went further into the topics that I really appreciated, and because of this second book, it makes me want to recommend this series to everybody. And of course, I still love the first book a lot as well. So the first book is in I Love You. Next is Kiki's Delivery Service by Eiko Kadono, and this book was just so lovely and cute and adorable and precious, and I'm putting this into Your Good. It was a really solid middle grade and, you know, just a really cozy, fun time. Okay, and now we have Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, and I really enjoyed this book, and I know a lot of other people did as well, but I also know that this book definitely has a lot of flaws. I definitely agree with a lot of the critiques as well, like it's not perfect. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and put this into I'm Ugly and I'm Proud, because I do recognize like all the issues that people have with it, and again, I agree with them as well. But I still really enjoyed my time reading it. Ultimately, I think this book does a good job for what it is, and I really, really liked it. So I'm Ugly and I'm Proud. Next, we have Star Wars Brotherhood by Mike Chen, and this is a novelization, I think, between episodes 2 and 3 of the prequel. I haven't actually ever watched the prequel for Star Wars, so I know, don't come at me. I'm not too familiar with the story and the characters, so when I first read this, it was kind of like being thrown in the middle of a fantasy world or a sci-fi world where, or like in the middle of a series where it's like the second or third book of a series, and obviously it assumes that you've already read the previous installments, so it references scenes that happened before and characters like you already know what they are, and obviously because I didn't watch the movies, I didn't know who they were, so I was kind of lost in the beginning. But I think this book did a really good job of portraying these characters, and by the end I was quite attached to them. So I'm putting this into Your Good. I had a good time with it. Next is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane, which is a sapphic contemporary romance. And I don't know, I didn't give this book a very high rating, and I think part of that is on me because the premise of the book just wasn't something that I was super interested in, because it is about a character who falls in love after a one-night stand, and that is just not something that I really understand. And I think because of that, like all the subsequent events that happened in the book, like her meeting with the person that she had the one night stand with, and like all the angst that happened between them and their relationship and the development of their romance, just didn't do anything for me. I really didn't feel anything at all for either of those two characters. So I'm putting this into food drink atmosphere, because for a romance book, it was really lacking that kind of romance for me. Okay, next we have both of the secret projects by Brandon Sanderson, the first one being Tress of the Emerald Sea. And I'm putting Tress in, you know, because I had a really great time reading this book. It was so much fun and it was so endearing. I love all of the characters, especially Anne. Anne is amazing. And, you know, I also really appreciated like what this book was really doing and how it just subverts literally every trope that you can think of. But there were some parts in it that got uncomfortably preachy for my liking. And I just never really like when stories really do that. So, you know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm gonna put Tress in chocolate because while I did have issues with those parts, I just think it's such a great book and I would recommend this to anybody. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, on the other hand, is the first book that's going to go into Belongs in the Trash. I did not like this book a single bit. Like, okay, the physical book itself, like with all the illustrations and the handbook portions with all the like the FAQ and just like all the little snippets of the handbook that it gives you, those were really fun and I had a great time with them. But like the story itself, with the main character and the journey that he goes through, and especially with the whole like white room concept, which is something that Project Hail Mary does, which by the way, Project Hail Mary I also didn't enjoy. It didn't land for me. It wasn't good. It was not to my liking. And it just read so much like a self-insert kind of story. Like you have this very generic dude who really has nothing special going on for him, and he's thrust into this like amazing fantasy like world, and I don't know, it didn't sit well with me, and there were some parts of it that I really wanted this book to explore and it didn't, but because it didn't, it kind of just like left a bad taste in my mouth. So yeah, this book, garbage. Like obviously not, I'm not gonna throw this book in the garbage because I paid a lot of money for it. Okay, like you know what I mean. Next we have Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee, which I really loved. It's another book that made me super emotional and made me ugly cry. And I'm gonna put it into I Love You. It was a really solid read. I really loved it. I really wish we got more in the story. Like I really think that this could have been an entire series if Fonda Lee wanted to do it that way. Unfortunately, it was just a novella. But you know what? It did what a novella is supposed to do, I think, which is just give you this really solid contained story and not overstay its welcome. Like just give you a glimpse into this world and leave you wanting a little bit more. And next we have A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, which is another book that I really enjoyed, but again, it's also one that hasn't really stuck with me. Like it was just fun when I was reading it, but I don't think it's really a book that I will think much about ever again. So I'm putting this one into Your Good. And then we have all three of the Twisted series by Anna Huang, which again, how does Tearmaker know to put all the series together? So I'll start off with the first book in this series, Twisted Love. And this one, I feel like this one, I'm putting it into food, drink atmosphere because the male love interest just didn't really seem like anything special to me. He was just like the dark, broody, mysterious with a dark past kind of type. And he just didn't really have much going for him other than that. And also I feel like, again, the relationship between these two characters wasn't really something that I could really root for. I didn't understand what they really saw in each other, and because of that I didn't understand like why I would want them to be together. So yeah, this one is food, drink, atmosphere. And the next book in the series is Twisted Games, which I really did not like because I hated the love interest. Like he's supposed to be this bodyguard, right, for the main character who's a princess, and he's all like, oh, I'm a professional bodyguard, I would never get involved with a client. But at the same time he's so possessive over her, and he's thinking about like, oh, you know, if you are with a guy like me, blah blah blah. And every time she's like in the vicinity of another male character, he's thinking about like, he's just so gross about it. So I'm putting this one into Belongs in the Trash because Reese, the male love interest, he is a garbage person. Bridget, on the other hand, the main character, I really enjoyed. So I'm sorry, Bridget, for putting you into Belongs in the Trash, but you know, I really didn't like this book at all. And the next book, Twisted Hate, is actually, ironically, the book that I think is the most polarizing in this series from the people who have read it, but it's actually my personal favorite. And like, I get it, like the male love interest in this isn't that great either. He does a lot of questionable things and is like verging on the unforgivable, I think, for the third act breakup. But I just love the dynamic between these two characters so much, and I loved the angst, and I actually did actively root for them to be together. So I am ugly and I'm proud about this book. All right, we are now down to the last 5 books in this tier ranking, so let's just go through them really quickly because I think I've been talking for a really long time already. So the next book is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi, which I really, really enjoyed. Another book that made me ugly cry, and I loved it a lot, so I'm putting this into I Love You. Again, this is another book that has really beautiful and lyrical and metaphorical writing, so it's not going to land for everybody, but I love that writing style, and this was exactly what I wanted. Then we have The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which is another book that I feel like is really underrated and underhyped. I don't really hear anyone else talking about this book ever, but I feel like this was a really good, solid gothic horror, and I was sufficiently creeped out and disturbed while reading this. So, you know, it did a good job for what it was. So I'm putting this into your good. Next, we have The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And you know what? I'm putting this into I Love You. It's not quite chocolate level because I did really love this book and I can definitely see what other people love about it. But I think I just went into it way too overhyped about it because of all the things that I hear people talk about it. And unpopular opinion, but I actually think I like Mistborn, the first book, better than The Way of Kings. I was just expecting a lot more from The Way of Kings because of all the things that I've heard about it. Like, as a series, I would definitely probably put Stormlight in chocolate, just based off of the 2 books that I have read. But just Way of Kings itself, I'm putting into just merely I Love You. Next, we have The Coven by Harper L. Woods, which is another absolutely ridiculous book, and the only reason I finished it and didn't DNF it was because I read it for a book club. But whoops, I accidentally moved my camera a bit, so sorry for the angle change. But yeah, The Coven. Oh my god, like the sheer audacity of this book to exist and to subject my own eyes to those words on the page, especially the love interest and the terrible things that he did, like literally assaulting the main character, and just the sheer nastiness of his character. My eyes, my pure eyes, just how dare, just how dare they? All jokes, of course. And now finally, that brings us to the last book on this list, The Lies of Locke Lamora, which, you know, is really a toss-up. It could go either way because I do love this book a lot. I love the characters. I love the writing. The writing especially is really great. But I do think that it is a little bit overhyped. Like, I can definitely understand the hype. And I think the first half totally lives up to that hype. But I feel like there were some things about it that I just really wanted a lot more from it. Locke wasn't quite what I was expecting. So, you know, it could go into food, drink atmosphere because I was just like a little bit disappointed about that. But overall, I still really, really loved it. So, you know what? I think I'm gonna put this into I Love You. All right, so that completes this tier ranking for all of the 39 books that I read in the beginning half of this year. Let's just take a quick overview of this to see if I like where everything is. Guns of the Dawn, of course. He was number 1, always. Words of Radiance. These are all definitely chocolate. I All right, you know what? I am satisfied with where I ranked all of these things. So yeah, that brings us to the conclusion of this video. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with my rankings, or if you don't, what tier would you place some of these books that you don't agree with? So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again in my next one. Bye!